З нагоди 90-х роковин Голодомору мережа нащадків Голодомору та Світова координаційна виховно-освітня рада Світового конгресу українців створили проект усних розповідей для учнів 8-12 класів «Ми пам'ятаємо». Сьогодні пропонуємо третє інтерв'ю з цієї серії учениці Софії Сливи та Софії Березhnuik. Вони розмовляли із нащадком жертв Голодомору Надією Чорненькою.
Софія Слива, Софія Березhnuik. Інтерв'ю з нащадком Голодомору Надією Чорненькою.
What does the Holodomor mean to you?
It means a very dark time in the history of our Ukrainian people. It's a very painful part of our history, and it's something that has affected our family personally, a loss of relatives, and a lifetime of painful memories. The preciousness of food. When you're cutting a potato, you cut it as thin as you can, because those peelings could be someone's meal. When you drop a piece of bread, you pick it up and you kiss it, and you be thankful that you have it.
Tell me about your relatives that survived the Holodomor.
So I'm going to speak to you about actually my mother's family that lived in the village of Timoshinka in the rayon, Mankivsky rayon in Cherkasska Oblast. So there was my grandparents, Evdokim Ivchenko, who was born in 1903. And then there was Baba Sofia Ivchenko, who was born in 1906. And my uncle Ivan, who was born in 1925. And my mother, who was born in 1929.
Are these relatives still living?
No, they have all passed away. So Baba and Nadia Ivchenko, they had 4 children altogether. They had Ivan and then Natasha. There was another child born in between that passed away at the age of 2. And then they had a child born when they were in Austria. And their level of education was, at that time, they had very little education, but they did know how to read and write. And my mother and Ivan, I do remember hearing stories of they did go to school. Periods of time in between the Holodomor and in between World War II, they did attend, but that was interrupted. Ivan did die during World War II, and my mother went on to, being interrupted so much with the war and the Holodomor. By the time she came to Canada, she didn't go to school. She went right to work, but went on to be a successful jewelry businesswoman.
How old were they during the Holodomor?
So Yid would have been 29. Baba would have been 26, and Ivan would have been 7 or 8 years old, and Natasha, my mother, would have been 3 to 4 during the war.
What did their family do for a living? If they were farmers, did they join the collective farm?
So they were farmers. They had a substantial farm from what my mother had said. They had 3 horses, 4 cows, chickens, and pigs, and they did not join the collective, and that was why things were taken away from them. My mother's memories were quite specific. She remembered many times the bloated people. She remembered the black wagon. She called it the Chornenka that would come and pick up the people with pitchforks and throw them on the wagon. And Baba Yid said that if you were sick, you made sure you hid if you could, because they even took people who were sick because they said they didn't want to come back in another time to pick them up so soon. So they just put everybody, so everybody hid when that wagon would come through.
Did they tell you about their experiences in 1932 to 33, or did you learn the story some other way?
So they did obviously tell me some of these horrible experiences. As children, we were too young for them to tell us such horrors. They told us about the Holodomor. They told us about all the relatives and friends that had passed away because of the Holodomor, but we didn't know the cause of the Holodomor. I mean, it could have been because of bad weather or whatever, as far as we as children thought, and growing up as teenagers. But it wasn't until we became adults ourselves that they started to explain much more details to us about what happened. I didn't learn anything in Ukrainian school or in English school during the time that I was growing up.
How did they survive the Holodomor?
That was an interesting story. Baba, at that time when things were getting really bad and they realized that there was no more food in the village like that, everything was being taken away, you couldn't hide it anywhere. They would find everything. And when they were starting to get desperate, Baba took my mother, Natasha, and went to the nearby village where another relative lived to see what it was like. Was it just as bad? Is there food over there? Or is it just their village in particular? And when she went there, she came back to say there was nothing there, if not worse than what they were experiencing in their village. So at that time, there were rumors going around that if they went to Donbass and worked in the mines, they would get a half a kilo of bread for their family or for themselves for the day, for their work. So Yid said, he said, I will take Ivan with me, who was 7 or 8 years old then. We will go to Donbass. We will get word, or we will come back. We will get word to you as to what we're going to do. Should you come, or do we stay? So word got to my grandmother to say, come to Donbass. Things weren't any better in the village. And so Baba went there with Natasha and joined Yid there. And both of them worked in the mines. And that's where Ivan got to go to a little bit of school. Apparently they had organized some kind of schooling for the children. And for my mom, who was still very young, 3, 4, not to really go to school yet, the people that were working different shifts, they took turns taking care of the younger children with them. And that's how they survived. Had they stayed in their village, they probably would not have.
What happened to them after the Holodomor ended?
So after the Holodomor, at some point during the Holodomor, they did go back, and only to find, that it was still very horrible in the village. So the story that they did go back to Donbass, they came and then they went.
How did they come to live in the country they immigrated to?
Because of World War II, they were forced to leave, and that's how they ended up coming to Canada.
Did any of your relatives die during the Holodomor?
Yes. So Yid's 2 sisters passed away. When they came back to the village, they had found them, and his parents, as far as and many of their friends in the village. Their village, they said at that time, had about 200 houses in it, and they said half of those households had vanished. We were raised to value freedom, freedom of religion, freedom to own land, freedom of speech, and freedom of education.
What is important for people to know about the Holodomor, and why is it so important to remember?
Well, this was a crime against innocent people, a crime against a nation, a crime against humanity, children, and elderly.
What is genocide? Why do you and other adults say genocide when talking about the Holodomor and the war in Ukraine now?
Genocide is a deliberate killing of a large number of people from an ethnic group or a particular nation with an aim of destroying a nation, purposefully taking all sources of food away to cause starvation was the method that was used in 1932 to 1933. Whereas now, the method of war that is calculated to annihilate a nation, again, children, elderly, and everyone.